Wir werfen als nächstes einen Blick auf Patrice the Movie, der letztes Jahr mit einem Emmy ausgezeichnet wurde. Die Dokumentation erzählt die Geschichte von Patrice Jeter und ihrem Partner Gary, die beide mit Behinderung leben und heiraten möchten, obwohl sie dadurch lebenswichtige Sozialleistungen riskieren. Der Film zeigt ihren entschlossenen Kampf gegen ein System, das Menschen mit Behinderung Gleichstellung verweigert und macht die alltäglichen strukturellen Barrieren sichtbar. Wir haben heute außerdem die besondere Ehre, den Regisseur Ted Passon persönlich bei uns zu begrüßen. Bevor wir ihn willkommen heißen, schauen wir uns zunächst einen kurzen Ausschnitt aus der Rede von Patrice Jeter an, die übrigens viral ging und wichtige behindertenpolitische Debatten ausgelöst hat. Und danach haben wir noch eine Videobotschaft von Patrice Jeter, die wir uns anschauen. Viel Spaß!
We made this movie as a love letter to all the disabled people like us who can't get married or even live with their partner without losing their Medicaid benefits, which they need in order to survive. To qualify for Medicaid, you also have to live on less than $2,000 a month, and it's really hard to survive below the poverty line. And now that Medicaid was cut by $1 trillion to pay for tax cuts for billionaires, we want to accept this award on behalf of all the millions of disabled people and low-income people like us who are going to lose their health care. We love you, and we see you, and we're scared just like you. We hope one day soon the government will take better care of those of us who don't have anything than those of us who have everything. Hi, I'm Patrice from Patrice the Movie. We're excited that the film has made it all the way to Germany. Right now, we're in a historical moment for our country. Last year, our government voted to give tax cuts to billionaires instead of funding health insurance for me and millions of other disabled people across the country. This is how it made me feel. After speaking to congressmen, writing letters, going to Washington, D.C., it seemed like they understood what we were talking about, and they turned around and went and did the opposite. We want politicians to take us seriously and work with us. We deserve access to health care, the right to marry, who we love, and to live full lives. Thank you for helping us spread the message. We love you.
And I'm super delighted to welcome Ted Passon, the director and producer of Patrice the Movie, here on stage with me. Let's stand, and if you feel tired, you can sit down.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, just for everyone who hasn't seen this speech before, für alle, die diese Rede noch nie gesehen haben, die Rede wurde jetzt genau in dem Moment gecuttet, wo es die Standing Ovation gab. Und diese Standing Ovation ging sehr, sehr lang, denn diese Rede hat in Amerika und in der ganzen Welt ganz, ganz viele Menschen berührt. There was a standing ovation, a long one, and it touched a lot of people. And then, ich glaube, das wird Ihnen und euch helfen, besser zu verstehen, was Patrice auch in ihrer Videobotschaft gesagt hat, dass nämlich zuerst ein Schritt nach vorne ging, dass auch sie gehört wurde und dann irgendwie ans wieder zurückging. Und darüber möchte ich jetzt mit Ted ein wenig sprechen. I want to talk to you about when Patrice, the movie, came out. You made a big wave. You even got invited to the White House. You got invited to speak to Whoopi Goldberg. You were on TV. Patrice was having dinner with Joe Biden. And how high were your hopes that you would be able to change this law that keeps disabled people from getting married unless they want to lose their medical and social benefits?
Yeah, so Hello?
Yeah, it's a little, yeah, it's not too, yeah.
Okay,
It's a
all right, I
little,
can hear
yeah.
it. So when we first started making the film, we talked to a lot of disability rights organizations who just let us know that, for years they've been working on this issue, and they had drafted legislation that would change this provision in the law that prevents disabled people to both get married and still collect their benefits and healthcare. And so they were like, what we need is to get attention to the issue. So if your film can do that, that would be great. And we were able to get the film on a major platform in the United States. And as you said, we were on all these talk shows, we're on all these news shows, there were all these stories. We got Patrice to the White House to meet President Biden, and all of the advocates that we were working with were like, oh my God, I think we're gonna do this. It was only like 2 months that all of this happened. And so we were getting very excited, and we were really thinking like, oh, the next time this goes up, we're gonna get the vote. And then the last presidential election happened.
Yeah.
And it all went away, unfortunately.
So basically you had this hope that things could change, that a movie could make an impact that fast, that a movie could bring political change, and then Trump happened?
And then Trump happened, yeah.
I mean, he didn't happen.
Well, yeah.
He got voted.
He got voted. I wish I could say that wasn't true, but he did. And
what did that change? What happened after that?
well, so then we immediately had to shift our goal, along with the entire disability rights community in what they were working on, because we knew before they were even coming in, they had already said that they were going to cut Medicaid, which is a program that obviously gives disabled people their health care in the US and low-income people, and it was already underfunded. It was already forcing you to live at poverty, below the poverty level to even accept benefits. And so then it became, not trying to expand those benefits, but just trying to keep them in place. And so we changed all of our outreach work to work in service of that. Unfortunately, that didn't happen either. They still cut it. And so now we've been working towards essentially just reminding people what happened, who did it, and the cuts were engineered to not take effect until after the next midterm election by design. And so we're using all of our work before the next election to remind everybody of the reality of what's coming, who did it, and how it's going to impact them.
What does it exactly mean for disabled people, so they just don't have access to health care?
So basically what happens is, so it's very, what they will say is that they're not cutting healthcare for disabled people. What they're doing is they're cutting 50% of all of the funding that goes to it. And all that money goes to the states, who actually give it to disabled people. So the states are going to be forced to actually make the cuts themselves. And so, yes, they are cutting it, even though they're technically not doing it directly. So it's predicted that it could be as high as 14, 17 million people losing their health care. But it will depend on how each individual state makes their decisions about what they're going to have to make cuts. It's just about how and what exactly.
But still, with Patrice, you have this platform to talk about this issue. So how big do you think is the impact of film to change our society, and especially in these challenging times, and the politicians to watch those films?
Yes. I do think film has a very important role to play, especially now. I do think, while I don't think film is a magic wand, I do think that advocates and people who are working and doing the real work of policy, they need storytelling to communicate to policymakers, to the public, about why these issues matter. And I think right now we live in a particularly divisive time because of social media algorithms keeping us all in echo chambers. And I do think filmmaking has of any mode of storytelling, personally, I think it just has it creates empathy in a way that nothing else does. We can literally live in another person's shoes. We can literally experience life with them. And I think, the only way change ever happens is through creating empathy. And so I think, the role of film can make a huge difference in that regard.
So in your opinion, what kind of film should we make? Because I think you told me that it wasn't easy to sell this film in the first place. And then you have a thing called the office test.
Yeah.
And I think this can be particularly interesting to a lot of German filmmakers because we're all so political and we want to make a change.
Yeah.
But how do we put these issues into these films and then maybe they become boring, and that's what we don't want. We want the film to reach people and we want the film to change people's hearts.
Yeah, so something I talk with my filmmaking colleagues about all the time is the context in which we are making films, if we want them, and then how to think about the context in order for the film to be seen by people. So I don't know if you've noticed, but things are pretty rough out there right now. The world is in a difficult place. I hope I'm not the first to tell you. And I do think, when we were making this film, when I was making a film before this, we used to have this thing we would call the office test, where we would say, okay, somebody's going to come home from a long day at work, they're going to be tired, they're going to have read the news, they're going to be depressed, they're going to be going through an existential crisis about the future. They have 2 hours before they go to bed. They could watch our thing, or they could just watch The Office. Why should they watch our thing? And so, I am a big believer that, storytelling, good storytelling, is not just telling you a problem for 2 hours. Because I do also think that, I think that it weighs too heavy on people, and they won't receive the information. It won't stick. It will not accomplish the goal that we're trying to accomplish. What it also does, I think, from a storytelling perspective and from a human perspective, is that the human experience is multifaceted. And in any situation, no matter how dire, no matter how bad, people find joy, people find humor, people find different emotional states. And I think, you also run the risk of presenting a community or an issue as one note, as just tragedy, or, without showing the complex humanity that we all have. And so I think you also tell a story that's not human. If we're just talking about the bad part, we're just talking about the depressing part. And it doesn't mean we're not including that. Of course we are. But I do think that in order for people to feel the emotional gravity of why an issue is sad or difficult or hard, they need some emotional reference in the story. And so if you're never showing them what happiness is, you're never providing an accurate contrast as to where the emotional state is of how hard the issue is. And so I think you're also presenting a picture that has less impact, because there's less of a journey from point A to point B emotionally. And so you're also numbing the emotional impact of the issue. And so I do think all of these are important as we think about how to communicate, not just our shared humanity, but the importance of these issues that we need to change.
Thank you so much. He'll still be around, but he's a great guy, so if you want to talk to him.